the floods in Texas, and and wildfires in LA, and that kind of stuff is it's not all going to happen at once, but like we can take agency over what we can do in those moments, and those are going to happen no matter what. Yeah. And then kind of it takes a step. That leads you kind of to the next step of taking agency and action toward climate change and climate justice.
A lot of the world is ending right now, or it's going to end tomorrow. And so you're just like, it all becomes noise to young people, right? Mm-hmm. But what really never becomes noise is the narrative of skill acquisition and learning as a way of self-empowerment. Right?
Mm-hmm. It's something I try to make older generations understand. Like, the fact that we have so much access to information all the time is very overwhelming. Like, yes, we're better informed, but we were not made to consume headlines about the world burning and war and famine and all this stuff 24/7,
Creating a warm and engaging introduction for your podcast, consider Great Tell Me as a suggestion that combines an upbeat and inviting spirit without any background music. Welcome to Tangelic Talks, your go-to podcast from Tangelic, where we dive into the vibrant world of clean energy, development, sustainability, and climate change in Africa. We bring you inspiring stories, insightful discussions, and groundbreaking innovations from the continent making waves in the global community. Tune in and join the conversation toward a brighter, greener future. Let's get started.
Welcome to Tangelic Talks, a podcast on the intersection of energy, equity, and empowerment with your co-hosts Victoria Cornelio and Andres Tamez. Today, we're talking with Elizabeth Doerr from Grief to Greatness and looking at different things that we can do so we can be more resilient, but also just, climate change is a bit sad, so let's make it a bit better. Elizabeth is a writer and communication strategist. Her writing focuses on climate justice, climate grief, resilience, disaster preparedness. You can find her weekly Substack newsletter at Cramming for the Apocalypse. And she is also principal at the social impact communications firm Doerr & Co., where she works with others to showcase thought leadership through book development and communication strategy. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we're very excited to have you. And I mentioned Cramming for the Apocalypse, so we got to touch on that first. It's a fascinating title. Can you tell us what sparked this project and what you're learning about the emotional landscape of climate justice, but also disaster preparedness?
Yeah. Well, I can kind of go back to, when I live in Portland, Oregon, and we moved to Portland in 2016. And so the year before we moved here, there was this big article that came out in the New Yorker by Catherine Schultz called The Really Big One, about the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake that could basically destroy the entire Pacific Northwest and could come at any given time in the next 50 years.
Very light.
And yeah, so my husband and I were like, should we move to Portland? But then, I'm from the Northwest originally, and I had friends here, so we kind of overcame that initial hesitation. But then when we moved here, I thought about the earthquake a lot, and we had my son I found out I was pregnant like just right after moving here, and so then was absorbed into that, and then. But then, especially when my son was born, the anxiety around the earthquake really increased. And then also around that time, in 2017, we experienced the Eagle Creek fire in the Columbia River Gorge, which is just right outside of Portland. Really incredibly beautiful area and one of my favorite parts of the region. But it was engulfed in flames for weeks. And, we had this blanket of smoke that was over Portland for days, and it felt really apocalyptic to me. And so, I already had the anxiety around earthquake and had already thought about like emergency preparedness. And then that added anxiety around climate change. And then also I had just brought a child into this world that kind of looked like it was dying. And so I'm a writer. And so like I navigate through these questions for myself through writing. I wrote a story for City Lab in 2019 about a neighborhood in Portland that was preparing together. And a lot of people here think of the earthquake as like the first thing that they're going to prepare for, even though it's probably less, I mean, it's imminent, but it's not as imminent as, say, a wildfire, which we've experienced multiple since 2017 that are nearby, and the smoke emergencies that are related to it. And so, yeah, it just, I mean, since for the last 9 years or so, I've had this, this in my mind. And when my son was a baby, we had a group of parents that got together to learn about kind of what we need to do to prepare. And then I've just always felt really unprepared. And my husband and I used to joke about how I would not survive the zombie apocalypse because I didn't have any like skills. Like, I mean, I have skills, but not any that are like practical in the apocalypse. So,
yeah, no, I'm getting bit first.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, so I was like, oh, this would be a great book, is to like learn these skills. And so it really started as a book idea, and it's still a book idea. And so I started the Substack just because I was already doing so much research on, building skills, building preparedness skills. And so I started the Substack as I was because it's like a book is such a long-term thing, and it's, it's gone up and down on where I'm going with it. I'm actually working on a different project book-wise, but still Cramming for the Apocalypse is alive and well on Substack and my weekly newsletters. And so, yeah, that was a long description of how I got to it. But then the title, Cramming for the Apocalypse, I actually credit my writing group for helping me with that, because I was trying to find a name for for my proposal, because I had finished my book proposal, and we all, I don't know, it was kind of a brainstorming session all together, and it came out from that. And and there's never, I've never wavered from it, because I was like, that is perfect. That's exactly what this is. And also, I think using the word apocalypse too is really important to me, because we have this idea that an apocalypse is like the entire world is wiped out. It is like, everyone is in crisis all at one time. But the truth is, it really is, it's smaller apocalypses happening to groups in different places at different times. I mean, there is an apocalypse happening in Gaza as we speak, and has been there. Indigenous peoples have experienced apocalypse. And so I think it's kind of like taking back the word, and also being like, it also is an opportunity to think about the future differently. And, we're not living in a time where everything is great. And if we lose everything, like maybe there are some things that are worth losing, like fascism, that kind of
maybe
stuff.
There's a couple of things we could let go.
Maybe there's a couple of things. So, yeah. So in a long story, that is where it all came from.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you breaking down the term apocalypse, because for you, apocalypse isn't just like, the world just ceases to exist. But like you said, there's all these smaller scale, quote unquote, things happening at the same time. What I was really interested in was the cramming part of things, because I think cramming, I don't know, it exerts a certain urgency. Like you cram for a test the night before, or you cram for a presentation. Like cramming is this thing that we do when we have no time, and we just have to like absorb a lot of information at once. And I guess from the way you explained it, you were going through all these anxieties at once, and you were like, I just need to be ready in case like the earth rumbles tomorrow. Like I need to do it now. So how do you like come down from that anxiety and, think a bit more clearly, move away from that fight or flight, and sort of ground yourself again?
Yeah. And, it's funny. I have a lot of friends who ask me if I get depressed thinking about apocalypse and doing apocalypse, research. Yeah. And, the funny thing is that, and I don't know if this works for everybody, but for me, I'm kind of like, I think exposure therapy really works. Like I think about it a lot. And I think the more prepared you get and the more you think about preparedness, it's like the more you realize that you have resilience and that you can get through a big change. And, we're incredibly adaptable as humans. We have adapted over, if we have to adapt, we will. I don't know, we do have a lot of negative things like the desire for power and wealth as a part of us, but there's also really a lot of good, in us as well. And so I don't know, for me, it has helped me just accepting the fact that climate change is here, that we are seeing it, and that things are going to be different. And I think that's something that it's kind of like the stages of grief, is that you have to reach a place of acceptance in order to kind of move on. It doesn't mean that I'm not, it's not a linear path to overcoming grief. I still have moments of lack of hope and sadness, but I think by and large, thinking about it, knowing that climate change is here, and also just looking at what solutions are and can be, has also been really important. And that's also important just writ large, because, the research, especially for young people, the research shows that, the doom and gloom narrative doesn't work to get people engaged in climate action. It's that there's something to save, that there's hope. And I mean, I do, this it was something my agent and I had issues with when we're trying to pitch the book, is that I think the term apocalypse is pretty jarring for a lot of people. And they're like, publishers were saying people are reading escapism right now. And it's true. I'm reading escapism. I also read apocalypse fiction. So I can do two things, so I think it's still like, I don't know if they really kind of looked deeper into it. It's actually a story of solutions. It's a story of hope. It's a story of optimism. And, and I'm as a writer and as for the reader, I kind of exist as this avatar for them to realize that this is a path to pushing through the grief and finding a path forward. And so, I don't know, I guess, in a nutshell, it's really just facing it.
Do you think that for the younger audiences, one of the aspects is, growing up in the information age, you've been through all of the doom and gloom narratives, and a lot of the world is ending right now, or it's going to end tomorrow, and so you're just like, it all becomes noise to young people, right? Mm-hmm. But what really never becomes noise is the narrative of skill acquisition and learning as a way of self-empowerment, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And being able to surpass, because the last 100 years are also a tale of dodging bullets in a way that is kind of wild. Yeah. The way we've managed to stay on track and keep ourselves afloat, right?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I mean, I think you're right. The skills acquisition for me was kind of a way to take agency, because it does seem like such a big, it is a big problem. And like anything, it feels like, what can I do? And so one first step is just to get prepared, is to have what you need. And also there's I've talked about this a lot in my writing and in the podcast that I do, is that there is a social responsibility for preparedness as well, because I think we get, anyone who's getting into emergency preparedness gets lumped into the kind of doomsday prepper, right-wing prepper that, down with the government. Yeah. I'm going to save myself and all the other, and my family, and that's it. Whereas, to be prepared is also to caring for other people, because if and when emergency services do come, if you are privileged enough to have a store of food or water, or even have a go bag and a place to go, you don't have to take those very limited resources. And so that is an act of agency to kind of, because we see that the results of climate change are disasters that happen in very local places, such as the floods in Texas, and in wildfires in LA, and that kind of stuff is it's not all going to happen at once, but like we can take agency over what we can do in those moments. And those are going to happen no matter what.
Yeah.
And then kind of it takes the step, that leads you kind of to the next step of taking agency and action toward climate change and climate justice, which is also very, it's going to depend on what you enjoy doing and what you can do. And I reference Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson a lot in that, because she's a climate researcher, activist, writer, and she's incredible. And she did a TED Talk a few years ago that was about the Venn diagram of climate action. And I can send you that resource to put into the show notes, but I go back to it so many times because it's like, you don't have to solve the entire issue of climate change. You don't even have to get into policy if that's not something that you can do. Like, look at what you're good at. Look at what needs to be done, and then look at what gives you joy. And at the center of that is where you can take action. And I think that like it starts with things that you can do individually, like prepare, and then, you can kind of take bigger steps.
A lot of people want to sort of focus on the abstract, larger picture when you have no control over that. And that not only, they're like, you need to pay attention to this, but not only does it also makes you more depressed is the problem, because you understand that even if I had control of American foreign policy, I don't have, or climate policy, I don't have control of Chinese climate policy and Russian climate policy. So there is no empowerment there, and there is actually not as a human, I just don't have the capacity to grasp that, to grieve with it.
Yeah. Well, and every time like an IPCC report comes out, that's like, we're doomed, or we've already reached the 1.5% degree or 1.5 degree threshold. And it's probably extremely frustrating for these scientists who have been calling the alarm since the 1970s, or sounding the alarm since the 1970s. But you're right. Like, it is so huge. And like, I oftentimes, even like as somebody who pays attention to climate change, data and all of that, I have to tune it out sometimes. Like, it's sometimes you just, and that is okay. But I think that the challenge is that, and this is kind of, human psychology, like the dissonance is, like, what can I do about this? This is so overwhelming. The immediate reaction can be like, it's futile. What can I even do about it? I'm not going to do anything. But if you can like take it in smaller chunks and kind of just think about it on individual levels and smaller actions that you can do, it is a lot easier to kind of push through that dissonance, and also to find other people who are doing that. I think that like, and that, and like, it's a cliche, but it's true, is that what you're doing, there are millions of other people doing it as well. And so you're not in isolation, even though sometimes it feels that way. And so that's why I think that finding other people, finding a community, even on Substack, like, I think it's been really amazing to find this community of people who are all kind of thinking in the same way. And I don't even, there are like hundreds of climate change and nature Substacks out there that are doing amazing work. And also, like, you can think of it as like a very, like, I'll give an example of a very specific issue. So the book that I'm working on now, I'm kind of in the proposal stages of it, is about learning about climate change through the national parks. And so I've been, I was in Yosemite a couple of weeks ago and have talked to some fire historians, the former like National Park Service fire chief. And, and there's, we were talking specifically about the sequoia tree, which like 20% of the giant sequoias, of mature sequoias, have been destroyed between 2015 and now, which is crazy. And they're supposed to be fire resistant. Yeah. And so like that is a canary in the coal mine about climate change. But I was talking to Tom Nichols, who was the up until 2014, he retired, but he was the chief of fire and aviation for the National Park Service. And I was like, is it like, part of it is that they haven't done a good enough job of doing prescribed fires and preparing the, and then they've kicked the can down the road far enough that now climate change is just speeding it up. And so I was like, well, is there any hope for it? Like, I asked him, I was like, this is, it's getting like, oh my God, I'm going to lose all the sequoia. And he was like, there's still time. Like, there are still options and there's a way. He's like, I don't know if there's a hard, I think that we just need to, it's challenging because the current administration has taken, and promised to take more funds away from not just the Park Service, but the Forest Service, the Department of the Interior generally, which is who fights our fires and not just fights fires, but manages fire, which is also includes prescribed burns. And so I think, like, for me, I've gotten so fascinated by fire, like, and I think about it a lot in the West because we have annual fire season. And I think that there are ways to, like, think about, something that you feel is important. And like, I'm like, I want to find a way to get involved in like advocacy around fire management. Like, is that something that I can do? Is that something, it's still like a big thing. And I'm still kind of a newbie in this area of fire, but it's like, become a real nerd about something and find out all the details and then you can kind of get really, and it's not, and you'll find out that we're not necessarily doomed. It's not too late. And I think that's where, I don't know, that's kind of, I had that on my mind because I spoke to Tom yesterday. And I'm writing about it. And so, like, right before I got on, I was like typing up some of the notes from it. And so it's like in my brain.
Yeah, very topical.
How much is the dissonance between, because like you have a lot of dissonance between people that really want to protect the environment with each other, right? And one of the big things is, one, controlled fires. Two is you have a really big problem right now in the United States and in Northern America in general, right? From, I believe, New Mexico to Northern Alberta, right? Of all the pine forests dying because of tree bark beetles. Mm-hmm. And so you have a lot of dead wood. And so how much, and then, so there's this fight going on between, you shouldn't go down trees, but actually we should look down at the trees that are dead wood because they are a huge risk. They are a problem that is going to cause these forests to light up. Yeah. Like no problem in the future. And so you have this infighting in a way between,
that has been going on for centuries.
Yay, another fight.
Yay. No, that's the thing that it's just so fascinating because I was reading Steve Pine I have it right here because I'm working on it. It's called Pyrocene Park. It was actually about Yosemite and like fire history. Oh, cool. But he has he's like kind of the preeminent fire historian in the US. And oh my gosh, that infighting has happened for centuries. And the thing that I think that is, I think actually Steve kind of distilled it for me, is that it's oftentimes the fight between the practitioners / the people who have traditional practices. So in the US and Canada, it was Indigenous peoples, the original peoples. In Europe as well, it's the farmers. Prescribed burns were a big part of agriculture in Europe as well. But the people who don't want it are the elites, the people in power. And so they're the ones that hold the purse strings. They're the ones that make the laws. And so, in Europe, they did away with prescribed burns in their current agriculture. I would be really curious to hear about that from the UK, is that, like, I didn't know this until I talked to Steve. Like, I really didn't know much about, fire in Europe. And so then, and it's the same. So it's like kind of this fight between who is who are the people on the ground and actually know the land, and who are the people who have this perception of the land. So like
the elites sort of view ourselves as humans as not a part of nature, and then you have the people that are part of nature, right? And they play their part, and it's the dissonance there. Sorry.
No, it's true. It's so true. And I think it's kind of like there's this, I don't know, I mean there's so many like layers to it too, because there's this so Frederick Law Olmsted, who was who designed Central Park, and like I don't know if it was him or Junior, but one of them was on the was like a national parks commissioner, and so like I think like they wanted to see these spaces essentially become like that, like but they, that being said, there was a difference to him between like parks like Central Park and the quote wilderness, like the ones that we are seeing, and that they believed fire was like vandalism essentially. And that I think were terms not, chosen very targeted terms, because he was referring to the indigenous peoples, the Miwok and the Paiutes that lived in the area, used prescribed fire to manage the land and the ecosystem, and also the livelihood of the peoples there. Really, it paid off. I mean, it was like a really vibrant, thriving ecosystem. The forests were healthy in that there wasn't a ton of underbrush, but that view is completely like that. Olmsted and the other commissioners, who were all in Washington, D.C. or the East Coast, didn't see it that way. And so that's, and I think that's the perception. I mean, that we see that today, like you said, it's the fire, like now we're dealing, especially in like national parks, you're also dealing not just with like, so like when I talked to Tom yesterday, he's like, most of Yosemite is backcountry wilderness that most people don't see. But if you're doing prescribed fire in that area, it all gets funneled through the valley, which is where all the tourists are. And so it becomes more of a nuisance because of the smoke. And so it's like there are these like social reasons that they can't do certain things, or they can't do, even if like the weather is perfect, the circumstances are great for prescribed fire.
And how beneficial it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, so it's just, that, I don't know. I feel like that's just.
It's a tug of war. It's a tug of war. And it sounds like you're exposed to a lot of this like conflicting information, and fire is such a scary thing as well. So I think it's just one of those where it's like, it's something I try to make older generations understand. Like the fact that we have so much access to information all the time is very overwhelming. Like, yes, we're better informed, but we were not made to consume headlines about the world burning and war and famine and all this stuff 24/7. It's too much. And there's a grief there. And like we were talking earlier, there's a powerlessness that you feel when you're exposed to all this and you're like, well, I can't do anything. So what would your advice be for someone who is just starting to think about all these big topics like you were 9-10 years ago?
That's a good question and kind of hard to answer, I think. I think if you're getting too overwhelmed, turn it off, like really just take a step back from the news and go walk in the woods. I think one of the things, touch grass, like connect. That actually is probably it. Like connect with the nature and the land around you. Take that moment and appreciate it. And just also like think about why it's worth, protecting and preserving. I think that's maybe the starting point, is that we do, and you can do this in urban settings too. I think that one thing and there are a lot of ways to go about it, like take a class that like a birding class in a city. You could there's so much wildlife in a city that I am still really bad at identifying. And even in wilderness, I'm like, yay, it's a tree. I don't know what kind of tree, it's a tree. But really just take a moment to appreciate, find a class that like helps you engage. I took a class on like foraging for herbal, like, or for natural remedies and stuff. And so it was just really cool. I mean, I don't know if I could actually use those yet, safely. But it was really cool because it was like, there's so many cool things. Like, this is just in like a, one hike in Portland that, like, in the city limits, that I could go on and find, all the, like, something that would like help with cough. And I just think that's maybe the first step, is really stop reading all the headlines. For it, I'm not saying forever, but take a moment, there are a lot of really great resources for people who are really experiencing deep grief about it. It's the Good Grief Network is actually like a group that has, I don't know if it's therapy or group, like coffee chats about, that really it's like reflecting on that grief and acknowledging it. I think that that's another resource as well. So, starting with that, and then kind of go from there. Think about what you care about and find the people around you and just dive into what the topic is that you think is interesting. But I think it starts with just appreciating our world and our earth, and see what's still there and worth saving.
And I guess when we start doing that, we start finding that community like you did through Substack, or that, parents group that you were telling us about. And, those climate cafes, I go to one every 3 months just to unpack climate anxiety, like working in
that's great.
So many things. And you're like, I just need to rant to someone who understands the dread I'm feeling right now. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And when you don't feel as alone, it feels like so other people are feeling this grief, which just is validating. And second, it's like, oh, these people are also taking action in their own way. So yeah. I mean, what's kind of about climate? Yeah. I mean, I haven't actually been to a climate cafe myself, so you can probably speak to this more, but from what I know is that it's also it's not about action in those groups, which I think is really good, because I think that can also get really overwhelming. You can start comparing yourself to other people, but it really is just sharing. Right?
Yeah. And that's really I think a lot of people in the environmental space and activists in general, I completely understand it. There's this need to feel productive. Like every day has to be spent saving the world. And it's like, you need to re-energize so you can go do that. You can't just be like strapped to a ship in the name of Greenpeace for 40 days. Like, take a break. Not all of us are doing that.
Who wrote the Nap Ministry?
What's that? Never heard of that.
Let's see. The Nap Ministry. Oh, Rest is Resistance. So I know that she has. I don't know what her book is called.
I love naps.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I take them about every day. This is the beauty of working from home.
I think that's a great tease, because on the blog, we're going to talk a lot more about that community aspect, taking not necessarily action, but like a nap. And how do we do that? We're all on fight or flight all the time with this grief and doom. So Elizabeth is going to help us understand a little bit more about how we ground ourselves, how we touch some grass metaphorically and maybe literally. But this has been Elizabeth Doerr talking about From Grief to Greatness. Thank you so much. Like I said, we're going to be on the blog, so check it out at tangeliclife.org. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Let's talk power, let's talk change. From rural lights to brighter days. Equity rising, voices strong. We're building tomorrow where we all belong. Tangelic Talks, energy, equity, pride. Empowering the world, side by side. A spark becomes a fire, a vision that's true. Together we rise, it starts with you.